Then question 247, why is the Mass both a sacrifice and a sacred meal?
The Mass, that means the Holy Eucharist, is both sacrifice and sacrament. The celebration, therefore, of the Holy Eucharist, which we call the Mass, begins with readings. Then the heart of it is the consecration of bread and wine, which the priest offers to God the Father. And all the people, through the priest and with the priest, offer Christ to God the Father.
All the people do, you're saying, all the people.
Yes, all the people, every baptized person, by that empowerment which baptism gives, the person can offer Christian worship. And the Holy Eucharist is the supreme act of Christian worship. Then, Christ gives himself to us in the last part of the Mass, the concluding part, the Holy Communion. That means we are one with Christ and also one with one another. So that sacred celebration is both sacrifice and Christ feeding us, who said, "My body is food indeed, my blood is drink indeed. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will not have life in you." That is why at the Last Supper, when he consecrated bread and wine, he gave the apostles, "Take and eat. This is my body. Take and drink. This is my blood of the new covenant." And he said, "Do this in commemoration of me." So when we celebrate Mass and receive the body and blood of Christ, after proper preparation for those well disposed, we are carrying out the instructions of Christ.
So, because so often we see the emphasis today on the meal, not so much the sacrifice. And this is the balance, the sacrifice and the meal, and receiving our Lord.
Yes, it is that type of emphasis that is wrong.
Yes.
Because there would be no sacred meal if there were no sacrifice. It is not just to nourish ourselves. It is not the primary reason why we come to Mass, to nourish ourselves. The primary reason is to adore God. And therefore the sacrifice is the whole thing. The sacred meal is part of the sacrifice. It is part of the sacrifice.
It's the gift we receive.
Yes, it is part of the sacrifice. But this sacrament is therefore, the Holy Eucharist is totally special among the sacraments because it is both sacrifice and sacrament.
Yes.
And it is the most wonderful gift that Christ has given to his church.
Well, just like we said on the other program, we're really being brought back space and time to be there at Calvary as Jesus offers himself to the Father, because this is not a representation again. I mean, we're really brought back to that one sacrifice.
Yes, we are brought back to that one sacrifice.
Yes.
So it is not like a concert show where a group of players just come and recite what Christ said and what the apostles said. That's ordinary presentation. But this Eucharistic celebration is a ritual representation. We are doing again what Christ did on Calvary, but we are doing it in the form of a sacrament. Christ is the chief person acting in both Calvary and the Last Supper.
Yes.
The Mass is like the Last Supper. And Christ is the chief person in both, and he is the victim in both. But the difference is that at the Last Supper, faith is needed in order to believe that it's Christ we are now receiving, his body and his blood. Faith is needed.
Yes. So I think this is so important, because when we enter Mass, and so often people come in and they're so distracted, and they go through and then they're looking at their watch and they're wondering when it's going to be over, and they're going because they have to go. And if we just realize where we're going to Calvary. We're going to be there with Jesus. We're going to be there offering ourselves with him to the Father. It's an incredible miracle it's actually a miracle that's going on in that altar.
If there were only, as the Imitation of Christ said, if the Holy Mass were celebrated only in one place in the whole world, and it were announced, If it was said the Pope will celebrate Mass on Christmas Day, that's the only Mass to be said in the Catholic Church for the whole year. I tell you, many people will fly to Rome from here.
That's right.
They will fly. But now, because the Mass is brought nearer home, we must not allow familiarity to breed contempt.
Right.
We must not... Christ has given us his sacrifice and made it very near to us. But we must strive to grow in faith. As St. Thomas Aquinas writes in the famous hymns for the feast of the body and blood of Christ, he says, let faith supply what the senses cannot give.
Yes.